And I was stunned, struck in a way that none of the publishers really were interested in presenting the orthodox view of the gospel or the restoration. And I think, well, who's actually just publishing what we believe? It was an archeologically sound replica. I was on the ship I was gone for 7 weeks altogether. I spent 3 weeks sailing on the ship, 1,500 miles. And my goal was to uh, see if this could have been Mulek's voyage. There is so much we know about Mulek, and he and his people are dying to tell their story. And I feel like that's my next mission, is to get their story told.
Welcome into another episode on Zion Media. Today we have Latter-day Chad, and we also have Andrea, our business manager, joining us. We don't have Shane or Trevor. They're actually in Babylon working on a business that is pretty phenomenal. And the intent is so that way we can focus more on Zion Media. And if you haven't noticed, we have done different like sponsorships and things on the channel. And our hope is to be able to do this full time and do this so that way we can bring great guests and great content to you. But we're really excited about our guest today because we have Boyd Tuttle, who actually has been circling some of the Heartland Book of Mormon conferences for some time now. And we're excited to hear his story, to hear his background, and also not just what he's been working on, but he actually was a crew member on the Phoenician ship. I think it's safe to call it a rebuild or a replica, where he actually was with the skipper. I know in America we like to call him a captain, but the skipper that actually led that expedition from, I believe it was, well, definitely from the old world to the new world. It was a huge discovery, realizing that this Phoenician ship had the capability to sail across the ocean, proving the sail or the travel of not just Nephi and his family, but also Mulek and his family. So we're excited to have you on, Boyd, to be able to talk with you about all of your experiences and your publishing company. So welcome to the podcast.
Well, thank you, David, Chad, Andrea. Good to be with you today. And I've gotten acquainted with you a little bit over, in passing a few times, but I'm happy to be able to share a few things with you today.
Yeah, thank you. And so tell us a little bit about yourself for our audience. I mean, they're new to you. I'm sure they're interested in your, how you, if you are a member of the church, if you're active, and also, I'm actually curious about where you served your mission. I love asking mission questions. And so tell us a little bit about yourself and, maybe even how you started Digital Legend.
All right. Okay. I'll give you a brief summary, brief bio, as it were. So I was the youngest of 7 children, and my father is pretty well known in the church, at least among people my age and older. His name was A. Theodore Tuttle, and he was a general authority of the church. And back in the day, in the 70s and 80s, when general authorities, members of the 70, there was only a dozen or so of them, so they spoke in almost every general conference. And so uh, he is a huge influence on my life and had a great impact. And and I really, love and respect my father. Sadly, he passed away when I was 25. That's why anybody younger than me really doesn't know him. Um, but he had tremendous influence on my life, especially regarding the Book of Mormon. He taught from it constantly, and just loved the Book of Mormon, loved the gospel, and so yes, I've tried to weekly follow in his footsteps in that regard. So yes, I am what you would call an active participating member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I do hold that testimony, and I have been able to receive my own testimony during my life, and that's something I hold as very precious. So my story is I grew up in South America because of my father's assignments. He spent 6 years in South America, Uruguay for 4 years when I was very young, and then again as a teenager, I spent 2 years living in Quito, Ecuador, and was able to learn Spanish and really got to love that area and the people and so forth. And then I spent my high school years at Brighton High School uh, in Salt Lake City and graduated from there and went on a mission to Japan, Tokyo South, and had a tremendous experience in Japan. Really loved it, had great mission presidents and companions and so forth. After my mission, I came back, finished my degree, married my wife, Holly, and my degree was in engineering, and I got hired by Xerox Corporation back in Rochester, New York. And we were able to move back there when we were just newlyweds. We had one little baby and had a great career there with Xerox. I was with Xerox for 25 years until they needed someone that spoke Japanese and had some technical skills, and so I ended up uh, moving to Japan, taking my then 6 children, and we lived in Yokohama, Japan, for 5 years, and just had a wonderful time. I mean, I'm so grateful to have a wife
Oh
who's
boy.
she's up for the adventure. She's willing to do whatever, and she just went along, and it was great. She just managed, driving on the other side of the road, everything in Japanese, and had no problem. In fact, she insisted that we go to a Japanese ward. She says, "Look, we can go to an American ward the rest of our lives, and why do that when we have this chance?" And so we said, "Okay." I said, "You won't understand a word they say, but we went to a Japanese ward, and we just became embraced by them and loved by them, and they provided
Console desk.
for Holly and the kids and everything." And just within a few months after that, I was called to be the bishop. So that was a kind of a shocker, not only to me, but to the members of the stake who had never seen a Gaijin bishop before, which I didn't know they could do that, but
Foreigner.
I did.
Foreigner.
Foreigner,
That's amazing.
Gaijin.
No,
Sorry, I'm like,
for,
go ahead, Chad.
I just understood that word.
Yeah, good job, Chad. So
Yeah, I'm like spitting in a little bit of little Japanese that I know, just like Honto desk, just like truly or something
really,
like that.
yeah, I know. So,
Nani.
so that's where I really learned Japanese because, in 2 years as a missionary, you get a very narrow vocabulary. You really don't learn to speak the language. You kind of learn how to give the discussions. But, um, eh, working in a Japanese company, doing Japanese all day long, and I did have a tutor for a while. You really do become, just fluent. It's just second nature. But anyway, that was an enjoyable experience for us as a family. And we came back, moved back to Rochester. Now, one of the things we loved about living in Rochester area is we were in the Palmyra Stake. And living in Palmyra was, although we were about 20 minutes away from Palmyra, it afforded us wonderful opportunities for our children to get to know the history of the church, to visit the sites there, and participate in the Hill Cumorah pageant. And so, as a family, we participated in the pageant 10 times, which I think had a tremendous influence on my children, especially. They really developed a love for the gospel and testimonies that you just can't match. And it was sad when they shut that down during COVID and never opened it again. I still have mixed feelings about that whole thing, but for us, we loved it and got the maximum benefit out of it. I think. After I'd come back to Xerox, I was still working for them, and they offered me a vice president position, which I thought, great, that's what I've always, wanted and worked hard to, qualify for. But as I really pursued that and sought any divine confirmation of that, taking that new role, which if you know how it is in corporate, Fortune 500 companies, once you're a VP, they kind of own you, and there are rewards associated with it, but there's also a price to be paid. And I guess the answer I got was no, just no, do not take that job. And so here I am in the middle. Now I have 9 children. We're building a home on a 20-acre farm. It was our dream home. Everything about it was the ideal world. And all of a sudden I said, no, I don't think I'll take that position. And they said, well, that's a problem because the job you're in is going away, which is why we kind of groomed you for this VP thing. And they said, but there is this severance package if you want, So I ended up taking an 18-month full salary and had to figure out how to reinvent myself and how to pay for all of my life. And that became a real interesting experience. That's another story. But that out of that was born my little publishing company called Digital Legend Press. And that has, carried us through the wilderness, as it were. And for me, it's been a joyful thing. It's been white knuckle rafting sometimes, but overall, it's just been an amazingly rewarding experience. I call it, and this is a talk or podcast that I often do. It's called Swirling in the Vortex. And we'll probably get into that a little bit in this conversation, because it really becomes my story, what happened after I left the corporate world. And I find myself at the center of this vortex of incredible information that is just pouring in to me as a publisher, someone who's able to get the words out. Just amazing people who are doing awesome research and studying, and the topics of gospel interest are not running out, okay? They're just exploding and expanding more and more, and that's what I've been finding. That's my story.
Remarkable. Yeah. Well, and I remember when I first met you, it was a phenomenal experience hearing, like, it was phenomenal hearing the story of how Digital Legends started, because it was really, um, I understand that you're impressed by the Lord to start Digital Legends. At least maybe that's how I understood it. I wanted to ask you, just a little detour, because, and I'm doing this because I have a little passion for Japan. So before moving on, I wanted to see. I'm not sure if you keep track of Japan and its people, or in any form or way, but I've noticed that there's been kind of a surge of Christianity that's happened in Japan. There's a lot of Japanese people that are giving their life to Christ in more of a mainstream way. But I know that the church has often been small in Japan, and they've had a temple for a long time. It's been, you know, quite some time. So I just wanted to hear your take, or maybe if you keep in touch with anybody in Japan, or if you follow any of that. What are your thoughts?
I've been out of touch with Japan for many years, and as it turns out, um, this fall, my daughter is and her new husband, as soon as they get married, are moving to Japan. And this is a daughter who was born while we were there, and she even has a Japanese name. Um, well, I won't dox her
What's
right
your
here, but
Okay, I was gonna say,
it's a
because that sounds like
Japanese
a
name.
great thing.
Yeah, and she and her husband will, be moving there because he's in a master's program in robotics, and he's gonna be going to Keio University, which is like the Harvard of
Crazy.
Japan. And so we have been renewing a lot of our connections because we are going to go over there to visit them, and shortly after they move there,
Okay.
and we're excited to do that. The church has not been growing rapidly in Japan as much as I think it could, and I think it has tremendous potential. And I think it's interesting of your comments about a surge in Christianity, which kind of makes me diverge over to a calling my wife and I currently have is under the Utah Area Presidency. They have a function called the Communications Council, and we're members of the Communications Council for Draper and Sandy. And as such, our assignment is to visit Christian churches. And we do every Sunday. We go to 3 different churches. In fact, we kind of permanently go to these. We go to a Catholic mass, we go to 2 evangelical
Oh,
churches.
wow.
And let me tell you, and we go to our sacrament meeting. So we go to four meetings on a Sunday, and I'll tell you, we get a lot of Jesus, and we get a lot of worship time, and we get lots of good things. And we've been able to form really good relationships and friendships with the pastors in these churches. And I just want to say, I just shout out to some of these pastors. I won't say their names right now because they haven't given me permission to put it in this context, but I will tell you, they're great people. And we invited 2 of them and their wives to come with us to General Conference in April, and they had a wonderful time. We go to their meetings almost every Sunday, and we swap messages back and forth, and I just have the highest respect for these guys, and they're doing good things, and they're really reaching an audience and reaching a a strata of the people that we, as in the church, which has Latter-day Saints here in Salt Lake, are not reaching. We don't reach the broad base. We reach kind of a narrow sector of people, and they reach a broad base of people, and I think they're doing a great service there. So I just want to put that
Yeah,
out.
I love that you said that, because I mean, there's a lot of critics that people, I mean, of the church, and I mean, but one thing I do love that they do is they do make an effort in interfaith. I mean, I think when we went down to Missouri, we discovered that the church does do stuff with the other branches of the Latter-day Saint movement. And then, you know, yeah, just what you said there, it just sounds amazing. Um, and one more question about Japan before we move on, is your mission, um, or while you were there in Japan, what was missionary work like for you, and maybe interacting with the local Japanese? I mean, maybe the areas. I mean, maybe you can mention one or two of the areas you served in.
Well, Japan does have a rich history in Christianity. I mean, if you go back to the early 1800s, there were missionaries there that had come over from various churches, and they had a huge uh, growth in their church, but they came under severe persecution. Those early Christians in Japan, and it was literally expunged. I mean, the Buddhists were not friendly to Christians in those early days. And now, with the Enlightenment and with the post World War II world, there's tremendous religious freedom in Japan, which is awesome. Um, but the people are amazing. I mean, as a bishop, I just was like carried by the people. There was very few major problems or challenges for me to deal with. The people are just so faithful and so good, and, they're just a constant, like, example to me and my family of what a real Latter-day Saint is like, and they're just wonderful people. I look forward to the day when the gospel will really fully roll out to there. When I was there as a missionary, um I had a unique experience. This is a whole nother podcast, but this is my mission experience in Tokyo South Mission, which was kind of an interesting situation in 1980s under a particular mission president named D. Groberg. He decided that he was going to follow President Kimball's, admonition to lengthen our stride and take the gospel to all the people and raise our vision. And so he really got the missionaries filled with faith and realizing that you can do this, right? And so the other missions were averaging 8 to 12 baptisms per month, and the other 8 missions, there were 9 missions at the time, and and we were baptizing 3 and 400, and so it was a very
Wow.
different, and the way he kind of jumped ahead, and we were teaching what he called open heart teaching. Instead of teaching the discussions by memorization, he said, "No, put those away. You're gonna go in there and you're gonna just ask questions, and you're going to open their heart, and when their heart is open, you'll just bear testimony and let the Spirit do the converting." And he was very kind of ahead of his time, more like what we're doing now with the Preach My Gospel and what the missionaries are doing, and he really raised our vision and set our expectations high that we could do this. It wasn't impossible, right? Japan is not an unfertile field. I mean, and so we literally saw hundreds and even thousands of people joined the church, during his time. And then his successor, who came after him, who I had both of them for 11 months each, also wonderful individual, very different in their styles. But the people are waiting and ready for the gospel if it can be presented in a way they can grasp and understand.
Yeah, one thing I do think about that, like, I think that we have this mindset where we have this sort of format for how we teach the gospel and the restoration and Joseph Smith. And the way the people in Japan are may not just respond to that. They might just be like, "What the heck is that?" Right? Like, they're not even really Christian. So I know for scenarios like that, I remember someone saying that there were people in Africa who weren't really super familiar with Christianity, and they just started with the pre-existence. And that's what resonated. And honestly, I can see that working with those guys. It's like, because for me, that's what the stuff that resonated with me. It's like not all the Jesus stuff. It's like, because we all get that weird sense of like there was something before this and we don't quite know what it is. And I do think that would appeal to those sort of people.
Chad,
So
that's interesting that you say that because that's exactly what we experienced. Because there's no conflict over Christianity. They don't know Christianity. So we just started off by telling them, "Hey, before we were born, we were brothers and sisters." And they loved that. Just like, "Oh, yeah, that's cool." So we were spirit brothers and sisters. We were born on this earth. We have a father, and he's God. And they're, "Oh, I've always wondered who God was." And so they didn't have any problem with these simple truths when you just lay them out.
Yeah,
That we
that's
had a
amazing.
lot of good, positive results with that.
I
So
mean,
go ahead, Chad.
yeah, I mean, I do think with some of those TV shows I've seen from over there that they definitely get that idea that we're in another world or something. That's the you talk about a lot, David.
Yeah, it's called an isekai.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. Thank you for sharing that. I was wondering also. I'm glad you shared that you had some of those phenomenal experiences. I was thinking too about what kind of spiritual experiences you had as a missionary or as a bishop. And it's funny to think that, you know, man, you're serving in Japan, in Tokyo, and then you probably hadn't even had the thought that, okay, someday I might be a bishop here. And then, you have just a complete different experience of being in the ward, the congregation. I mean, there's a lot of people that come home from the mission, I'm sure, that have served as a bishop or some stake leadership, and and then they end up like I've never served in. I served as a ward mission leader. I think that that's the most that I've had as a calling. But it's pretty cool. So Andrea actually has a really great question about your digital legend, which we already introduced. Do you want to ask that, Andrea?
Yeah, sure. So, because I told David I wanted to ask you about this before we were recording, because Boyd, I saw you at the conference over the weekend at the Book of Mormon conference put on by Wayne May, and I was really impressed. I know you just said I had this little publishing company, and I'm like, oh boy, that was not little. And I'm looking at it online right now at all the titles, and I watched you throughout the weekend sell out of books and have to go back out to your supply and that you brought and bring more in, and like just how amazing your company is. And I got to saw you talk to Shane about your mission statement, and I just wanted you to touch on a few points there of why you're passionate about what you do, why you started it, and what some parts that are in that mission statement, and just anything you feel to share with us about it.
Thank you, Andrea. I appreciate it. It was nice to meet you and get acquainted there. I did share with Shane my mission statement a little bit, and it's funny, I've put this together over a period of time and kind of refined it a bit, and we can post it here. And basically the first paragraph is kind of captures overall at Digital Legend, we unapologetically stand as a faith-affirming Latter-day Saint publishing house rooted in the enduring truths of the Restoration. Our mission is clear: to publish only that which builds faith in the Lord Jesus Christ and upholds the teachings of the prophets, both past and present. And that statement largely arose from I was involved in another conference, I won't name it, a few weeks ago, that there were a lot of LDS publishers there, and there was a lot of different talks being given and so forth. And it was dealing more with church history. And I was struck in a way that none of the publishers really were interested in presenting the Orthodox view of the gospel or the restoration. They were all into various kind of down interesting channels, maybe rabbit holes of very obscure kinds of things, which I guess as scholars, that's what's interesting to them, right? To pursue these um, let's just say offshoots of interesting topics or whatever they feel is interesting. And I think, well, who's actually just publishing what we believe? It was just like, where do people go to get the center line so that they can see how far to the left or the right these other ones might have diverged? I mean, you have to have a baseline, to know to measure from. And so I figured, well, that's me. That's what I want to be. I'm going to try to publish authors who uphold that opening statement, right?
Thank you for watching this episode on Zion Media. And I'm actually here to let you know that we have a sponsor. It's Oraqel Code. Now, you've heard us talking about Oraqel Code a couple times. It's an algorithm and application that we're actually designing. And it actually tells you not only a little bit about yourself, but we've been able to adjust this algorithm or this app in a way that allows us to make a song for people. And some of the responses that we're getting is that this song is almost like a patriarchal song, because when people see what their Oracle Code says about them, they say it's like, whoa, that's like my patriarchal blessing, or like a special message just for me. And then when we make a song out of it, it makes it even more unique and more attuned to who you are and your purpose here on life. And so, really excited about that. The way you get access to your Oraqel Code and song is by go ahead and using the QR code that's on screen, or going in the link in the description and filling out the form, so that way you can be able to get your own Oraqel Code. I'm really excited to be able to be a part of this transformation and this blessing in people's lives. And I look forward to hearing what your Oraqel Code says about you today.
I go on. I have in the next paragraph, and you post this later. He says, "We affirm the prophetic mantle above worldly wisdom. When scholars and prophets disagree, we place exclamation points after the words of prophets and question marks after the scholars. In an age increasingly shaped by shifting ideologies and intellectual trends, we anchor our work in the Christ-centered and prophetic theology that has guided faithful Latter-day Saints since Joseph Smith first declared that the heavens were open to revelation." So there's a lot of, trusting in the arm of flesh versus the word of God, and we're gonna err to the word of God. That's just our policy. And then the next point is we hold the Book of Mormon to be God's transcendent gift to a fallen world. Not merely the property of a particular church or denomination, but indeed a sacred witness to all who seek after truth. And this comes back to something I learned from a gentleman that I really love and respect. His name's Lynn Ridenauer. I published a couple of his books, and he's a Baptist minister. And he said, "Hey, look, you don't have to be a Jew to read the Bible. So why do you have to be a Mormon to read the Book of Mormon?" And I was like, that's a really good point. It's a really good point. And we get all caught up in, well, who has the rights to this or that or the other? Nobody has the rights to the Book of Mormon. It's God's gift. And by the way, the copyright is long since expired. So anyone and everyone can publish it, receive it, read it, enjoy it, and gain from it, right? You don't have to belong to a church or denomination to be blessed by the Book of Mormon. And I think that's somehow we've so interwoven the book with a building or a church or a denomination that people become repulsed by what they perceive to be negatives about the church, when it has nothing to do with it. The book stands alone. And it's like the glass is the vehicle or the vessel, and the gospel is the water that you pour in the vessel. And the vessel might not appeal to everybody, but the gospel inside is pure and good. And so that's one thing that I feel is strongly about, that people need to embrace the message of the gospel and not get caught up in the workings of the church, because sometimes that puts people off. Then when it gets down to our publishing endeavor, it says, "We publish voices, faithful scholars, seasoned thinkers, and devoted scriptorians who speak truth, whose insights arise not necessarily from academic prestige, but from the labor of honest toil, intellectual and spiritual effort." So this is the thing. I started to do kind of an analysis. I looked at all the people that I've published, and I realized they're not all PhDs. In fact, very few. And they're mostly just self-made scholars. And as I've thought about it, that's the real scholar, because these people, they didn't get it wasn't doing it for a grade or a degree or an award. They did it because of the passion that they feel about the subject that they have. And so that's what I've seen with the people that we've published. Many of the voices we published have hitherto been silenced or dismissed by institutional gatekeepers and self-appointed intellectual elites. I'm going to annoy a few people by saying that, but our goal is to ensure that these voices are neither lost nor forgotten. So for whatever reason, I don't know why Little Company came into existence, but if for no other reason, it was to publish these people who have really important messages to say, but it's not considered kosher, or it doesn't fit the narrative or whatever like that. And I think they need to have their voices heard.
There is something you said that really blew my mind. I just have to comment on it, and that is about the Book of Mormon and how you said that it transcends. How did you phrase it? Transcends, or it helps. Go ahead.
Any church or religion, it transcends that. It's God's gift to a fallen world.
Yeah. Well, and see, I find that word really interesting because there's a lot of, well, first off, I mean, we've had a lot of different guests on Zion Media, and we don't necessarily agree with all of them, but we like talking about these things, like having an LDS spin on every subject in the world. And that's kind of, I think, what our approach has been with Zion Media. And transcend is a word that often is associated with like a new age idea or belief that, we can be elevated. But I think it's interesting because it made me think about, um, I mean, first off, when I joined the church, I was taught that every religion has some truth. Just the Latter-day Saints, have been able to receive the most of the truth. And I thought that was cool. And then, but before I even learned about the church or knew it existed, beyond a commercial at the age of 3 or something, um, I remember praying and asking God to send or put me where He wanted me to be, and this was where I ended up being is in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, getting to see the Book of Mormon and getting to read and learn about it. But out of all the ways that God can, reveal truth and a higher form of truth, He did it through the Book of Mormon. Like, I just thought that that was really phenomenal because that's the connection I made when you were talking about that. Is there's a lot of religions out there, but out of all the ways He could have introduced new truth or something that would get on the map, because Latter-day Saints, out of all the Christian faiths, they somehow have an esoteric, you know uh group of people that love talking about those deep doctrines or deep things, Book of Enoch and Dead Sea Scrolls and Nimenha, but there's none of them have gotten as much world recognition as close as the Bible, than other than the Book of Mormon. And so,
Well,
Right.
go ahead.
so
Yeah.
something I might add on that is, from my perspective, I was into all the weird stuff before I was into the Book of Mormon, right? I was into all the New Age, esoteric stuff. That's what I believed in. That's what I thought was real. I'd had experiences with that stuff. And for me, one thing that really struck that caught my attention is the fact that I also did a lot of research and I was like, okay, there's no way that this Jesus stuff could be faked. We have 1,000 years before the book of Zechariah, and God's talking about how the Jews are going to look at his body they pierced, right? And looking at all these coincidences, what people would call them that. And then the LDS theology kind of bridges that gap where it's like, okay, yeah, that weird mystical stuff, it's real, right? Our founder had seer stones, and his family knew about like all these ancient weird angel stuff and all this cool stuff. When you really start looking into who Joseph Smith's family is, or I think that they had hidden knowledge from the Holy Grail bloodline. That's my personal opinion. But on the other end, I think what the church is mostly doing is trying to bring a lot of these deeper ideas to the mainstream Christian world that may have been lost during the apostasy, right? Like the Book of Mormon really does put an emphasis on, no, there's a lot of meat, and a lot of the people don't want to accept the meat. Woe unto those who say they have enough. So it sort of bridges that gap where it's like, with where a lot of the new age type people sort of get lost is, they become aware of like, oh, there's some sort of like universal intelligence or consciousness, which Joseph Smith talked about. And then they think that means I'm God, and that means I'm everything, and you're God, and we're all God, and this is all inside our head, and nothing's real. And then they sort of lose their minds, right? And that's also, I think, when I've really pondered this philosophically, the resurrection is important. It's important that we are unified as a person, that we have a physical body, that we are ourselves, that we're not just the universe experiencing itself or whatever.
Boyd, I felt like you had a little bit more to share on that. subject too. So I wanted to give you a chance to finish that up.
Well, no, on what subject? I don't know, because we're going all over the place now.
We yeah. Well, just off of your mission statement and what you were reading off of there.
Yeah, well, I mean, it gets into finer and finer degrees of gradation here, but we boldly declare, no, we boldly blend knowledge and inspiration. We trust in the literal truth of the scriptures. Now, this is probably now getting to me. I can't put this on a committee or anything. It's just me. I believe the scriptures are true, and I believe they're literally true. And that puts me in a small camp. I'll tell you right now, because most people do not believe that they're literally true. Okay, at the conference I was at 3 weeks ago, there was a debate over whether or not gold plates actually existed. Okay, so I'm like, really? Whoa, really? So, yeah, I believe the scriptures, and I believe that they're true, and that they're literally true. I don't believe Joseph Smith was faking us or lying to us or misleading us and giving us all this inspired wisdom, just out of his head, which is what the argument is. It's just inspired fiction. There was no Nephi, there was no Lehi, there was no real, these people didn't actually exist, but they teach us good important lessons, right? Really? They teach us important lessons like it's okay to lie and cheat and mislead people? No, that you can't carry. That's a cognitive dissonance. And one of the things I'm uncomfortable with is cognitive dissonance. I can't carry two mutually exclusive ideas at the same time and be comfortable with that. But some people can. And kudos if you can. I mean, it's like great, but I can't. I can't have all the declarations of every prophet since Joseph Smith that the Hill Cumorah in Western New York is the one and only Hill Cumorah. Every prophet has confirmed that. It is just fact, okay?
I just want to say I love that you bring this up, and I know it's hard to communicate on a podcast, but when I was standing with you and saying we were all talking, and I just really felt your heart and passion behind this exact thing they're saying, and I want to toss it back to you in a second, but I just wanted to reiterate that of how you brought up how it just feels like you're kind of in the minority of these feelings that you're telling us about right now, and how important it is.
I mean, most intellectuals, let me be clear, most intellectuals do not believe Adam and Eve were the first humans, okay? They believe in pre-Adamites. I don't. I believe Adam and Eve were what the scriptures say, the first man, the first woman, and that we all descended from them. I believe that Noah and his 3 sons and their wives were a restart of the lineage of humankind after the flood. I believe the flood covered the whole world. See, that puts me in a very small minority, because most people say, "Oh yeah, I believe in flood. I believe the flood and everything." But it's like, wait, literally, you believe that there was enough water to cover Mount Everest, 30,000 feet? And they're like, "Wow, I don't know. Maybe it's not literal." It's like, yeah, no, I do. I believe it was literal. I believe it was 30,000 feet deep, and I believe that it covered all the high mountains. But in order to do that, you have to go other places that people are uncomfortable to go. Like, well, where did all the water come from? Certainly didn't come from the water that's on the planet. There's not enough water. Okay. It has to come from somewhere else. And where did it come from? Well, inside the earth. So now you're into a whole new big paradigm shift, which says, wait, there's no magma in the earth. What is it instead? Well, I would submit it's water. That's what we're told in scripture, right? In the very first verse of Genesis, the spirit of the Almighty moved upon the face of the deep, right? And that's the waters, right? And he caused the dry land to appear. So it's not dry, it's wet. Right? So the dry land came out of the waters, and then there was a firmament above and below, waters above and waters below. So, I mean, if we don't literally believe what the scriptures say, then we're believing the philosophies of men.
Yeah.
And and again, everybody gets to choose. That's what's so awesome about life and mortality and everything, is that we're thrown all the mists of darkness and all the questions and challenges that we just can't figure out. Well, He's given us the answers. It's up to us to choose to believe them or not. And what's the rod that we hang to know?
Could I just
Go ahead.
Yes, so true. And I just wanted to point out of how special and important it is that this is your perspective, and that you have a publishing company and what value that brings to the world, because it just like makes me think about, and if you're not comfortable talking about it, you don't have to, but I know Shane gave you an Oracle code at the event and your song, and or yeah, he ran your code, and there were some things that were very interesting about who you are and why you're here, and we were like, our minds were blown. So if you want to share any of that, I just think it's so cool to connect those dots. Not having to go into any detail, but I just wanted to bring that up.
Yeah, no. Okay, so I had never met Shane before, and when we did get a chance to visit there, I think we really struck we have a I don't know, common core that we found there pretty quickly. And so I guess he felt like he needed to give me my reading, whatever it was. Is he's got this interesting software
Gematria.
algorithm. What is it? Gematria, which I'm familiar
Yeah, so it's like the Hebrew numerology they would
Yeah,
use
no,
to like figure out. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm very familiar with gematria. I've just never seen it used in that particular way. But I will say, when he gave me my reading, it was striking. It was interesting. It was way beyond a horoscope. Okay, it was like, wow, that's pretty insightful. Given that we had only talked for maybe 5 minutes, and he didn't know me from Adam, really, and but his little algorithm brought out some interesting insights that I said, that's right here in my mission statement. I mean, I literally read it out of my mission statement.
Amazing.
It was like a direct quote, and this is never getting published. It's not
See,
like
I didn't see this. So he did your Oracle code, and then did you read a little bit of your mission statement, or did you just tell him that?
yeah, I think you were there, right, Andrea?
Yeah, I was there. So he was reading the code to Boyd, and then we kept everyone like he kept like having these like wide eyes about stuff, and then he pointed out the mission statement, and we just looked at the words there and compared it to the words in the reading, and it was just so cool. And I think
I will just say the Oracle specifically said that your mission is to bring out voices that are otherwise suppressed or unable to be heard. And I'm like, wait a minute. Did you read this? But he couldn't have, because I've never put it out. It's not in there.
like words like published or something in there too. Like
Yeah, it said something about like these things are recorded in scrolls.
yeah, so that was part of it.
You're revealing the scrolls. I don't know. So it was okay. I will say, Andrew, it was interesting. Okay. So I have to explore that a little further. So it's just
So reread that.
a moment of interest.
Yeah.
So he did send me it. I'll have to look at it
We
again.
continually, and this is just so you know, Boyd, we continually get people that say that it's like a patriarchal blessing, or that it's like they really resonate with the Oracle code. So thank you for sharing that, or and asking that too, Andrea. So yeah, so moving on a little bit, we know too, so we discovered, well, I knew this a little bit already about you, but you got to interview with Scripture Central, and you were interviewed for a very specific reason, and that was the Phoenician ships, and your expedition with Philip Beale, who happens to be a distant cousin of yours, but you were able to be on that ship, that replica of a Phoenician build, to support the fact that, or the Book of Mormon peoples, Mulek and also Nephi's family sailed across the ocean, the Atlantic too. So, I mean, can you share a little bit about your experience of what that was like?
Wow. Okay. So we only have a few minutes here, but I'll just really in a nutshell version. So I got to know Philip Beale because of the book that he originally published called Sailing Close to the Wind, which was about his first expedition where he sailed around Africa in a 600 BC Phoenician sailing vessel, right, which he commissioned to be rebuilt based on a design that came out of a shipwreck that is found off the coast of France. And based on that, it was an archaeologically sound replica. It was even examined by marine archaeologists to confirm that it was a proper replica, properly built and certifiable as a authentic replica, which is super important because he's into experimental archaeology, and so his goal is to recreate events from the past using what they used. And so he sailed that ship in 2008, 2010. He sailed it around uh, Africa, and in the process, he ended up almost in the Gulf of Mexico, Gulf of America, whatever we want to call it. And he realized that the natural currents want to take you right to the New World. It wasn't just taking you around Africa. And he was trying to prove what the Greek historian Herodotus had written about the Phoenicians doing that back in the, in 600 BC. So then later, I had opportunity to get acquainted with him because I was promoting his book here in the States. Anyway, he invited me, long story short, invited me to join his crew on the next expedition in 2019 to sail it from Carthage, Tunisia to America. And so I signed up for it and did. And it was an amazing experience. We sailed this ship. You can see the pictures there. It is a true replica. And it turns out Philip and I do share a common ancestor out of England, which is where he's still from. He still lives where my ancient ancestor, not ancient, maybe in the 1800s. He and I have a common ancestor, Beale, and that's on my father's side. So we found that was interesting. But anyway, I was on the ship I was gone for 7 weeks altogether. I spent 3 weeks sailing on the ship, 1,500 miles across the Mediterranean and part of the Atlantic into up to Cadiz, Spain. And yeah, it was an amazing experience. And then I was on the other end of the ship when it came, the voyage when it came into Florida. And that's the picture that you're showing up there. That's when we came into Fort Lauderdale. And that was our first arrival in USA. So anyway, that was an amazing experience. And so I am writing a book about this whole thing. And my goal was to see if this could have been Mulek's voyage, right? And so it's caused me to do a deep dive into Mulek. And first I thought, well, there's nothing written about Mulek. We don't know anything about him. Well, boy, have I been corrected on that misassumption, right? There is so much we know about Mulek, and he and his people are dying to tell their story. And I feel like that's my next mission, is to get their story told, because the hero or heroine in this story I think is his mother. And because he was a tiny infant, right? And a little boy at the time. He wasn't really the key player, but his mother and her entourage and those that travel with her are the key players in the story of Mulek. And they were not faithless people. We often give them short shrift because by the time Mosiah met them, they couldn't speak the Hebrew language. They didn't have the scriptures. They had no law of Moses. They had virtually no culture among them anymore because it had all been lost, because they didn't have an enduring set of scriptures with them that they had brought. They brought the scrolls. I'm convinced they would have brought their Torah scrolls, but they doesn't last long enough, and they would have worn out, and they lost it. And so they want us to know that they were faithful people, and they strove, whatever that verb is, to be true and faithful to Jehovah and look forward to the Messiah. And I am convinced that the reason they ended up where they did, which I believe Zarahemla is, as it says in section 125 of the Doctrine and Covenants, verse 3, opposite the city of Nauvoo, named the city Zarahemla. Right? I think the Lord was giving us a clue there. And that's where I think they ended up. And why? Because the closest you can get a ship to the New Jerusalem. Right? I mean,
Interesting.
that's as close as you can get a ship there. And so who was Mulek? He was the next heir of the kingdom of Judah, right? Zedekiah was the rightful king, even though he was a puppet king. He was a rightful in that line down from Judah, and Genesis 49, the scepter shall never depart from thee. Judah, it's a blessing to Judah, the scepter being the kingly rights. And so the Lord keeps his promises. Now, the rest of the world doesn't know that the Lord preserved the seed of Zedekiah in the form of Mulek, brought him from the old Jerusalem to the New Jerusalem. Isn't that amazing? I mean, how awesome is the Lord to just honor his promise no matter what. So of course he's going to go from there to there. It also explains why Coriantumr eventually ended up among the people of the Mulekites. Why? Because what was he looking for? He was looking for the New Jerusalem too. Because why?
Yeah.
Who would have known? In Ether is telling us that when the waters receded off the face of this land, it became a promised land, and the New Jerusalem shall be built here in this land. So Ether and Coriantumr were contemporaries. Ether was obviously teaching Coriantumr about the New Jerusalem. So I'm convinced after Coriantumr saw the destruction of his people, saw the fulfillment of everything that Ether had predicted. He also knew that the New Jerusalem was where Ether told him, and so that's where he went. And he probably walked, from Cumorah down there, 1,200 miles, 1,400 miles, and eventually found the people of Mulek, spent 9 months with them, tried to tell them his story. He carved a stone which had his story in it. That's all in this book that I'm writing, and it's amazing how much we really do know about those people and their desire to stay faithful to the Lord, even though they lost it in the passage of time. But that's a quick recap on that.
Genesis 49 that you brought up about the Judah bloodline and whatnot. It says something about Judah being a lion and ruling with a scepter until Shiloh comes. How do you interpret that? Do you mean that? Because a lot of people believe that there's going to be some sort of raising up of like the Davidic line before Christ comes, right? That's something Joseph Smith talked a little bit about. That Davidic covenant.
Not Avraham Gileadi, and I'm not trying to become him overnight. I don't know. I don't know that, and I haven't dived into that part of the story, and I'm highly I'm treating it as the historical fiction of what actually happened, and I'm kind of doing flashbacks between my experience on the voyage, on the ship, and their experience. And there's a lot of parallels, and it's amazing how many there are, including the experience of Jonah. Who even talks about Jonah, right? No, Jonah was an Israelite prophet called to tell the people to repent in Nineveh. Well, he didn't want to do that, so he got on a Phoenician ship, 750 BC. Okay, 150 years before Lehi, he gets on a ship, leaves Joppa, and sails to what is now modern Cadiz, which in those days was the far Tarshish, and he's on his way to Tarshish, which is Cadiz, Spain. Wow, there's just so much stuff here. Do you know that Cadiz, Gad, that's the Gadianton? Okay, so
Yeah, I've heard that before. That somehow the tribe of Gad got here.
We don't know, but there's some really interesting insights there. How did Gadianton end up in the New World? How did he end up among the Nephites? I think he was one of the crewmen on the Phoenician ship. Cadiz was founded by the Phoenicians. Now the Phoenicians worshipped Baal, and those practices descended into some pretty wicked stuff, right? I think to begin with they were righteous, like almost every religion starts off on a righteous note, right?
Oh yeah.
And so I don't want to broad brush every Baal worshiper as just evil from the get-go. I think there's a lot of goodness there at one time, but I think it, like everything, look what's happened in Christianity everywhere. It can descend into wickedness when it yields to Satan's, influence.
Yeah.
And so anyway, that's part of the story as well. I mean, Gadianton. And so it's crazy how many connections there are between the old world and the new world.
Yeah, I mean, I've done a little bit of research into the Canaanite stuff and the Baal stuff, and to me, I feel like it's like an apostate version of the Israelite religion, right? There's this whole story of Baal, like it's the oldest known tablet we have, the Baal cycle, where because of his evil brother, he dies, and then he resurrects and ascends to the throne of his father and takes the place of his father. And Baal means Lord, and there's a lot of poetry in the Old Testament where in the Canaanite tablets they're applying it for Baal, but then the same poems are being used for Jehovah in the Old Testament. So I think it's like it's splintered off and did its own thing. That's the vibe I get.
Yeah, I'm sure everything stems from a common core to begin with. All right, how's your time?
Yeah, well, I wanted to thank you for coming on. And even though we had like a limited time, I feel like we went over a ton. This is one of our shorter episodes on Zion Media, but
I got one other thing. Before we wrap
we have
up.
a little time.
Yeah, I think I see a few minutes here. There's a whole nother area, and you know what I'm doing? I'm just touching on the tops of these things because these can all be explored later. But I'm in the middle of another study, and it's called Michigan Copper. Okay, so the study is on Michigan Copper. I wish I had my pieces here. I could show you, but we can put them up later. So what's happening? All right. So there's something called the Bronze Age. Now, bronze begins as far back as historical time goes, right? And it continues right up until about 1000 BC, 1200 to 1000 BC. The Bronze Age comes to a sudden and abrupt halt. Okay, now this is in the old world, Mesopotamia and everything. They're doing great things with bronze, and it just comes to a screeching halt about 1000 BC, and it's about 100 years of dissolution before they figure out how to smelt iron, and then begins the Iron Age, and it goes on from there. So, what is happening in that parallel time frame? Now let's move. So that's the old world story. Now let's move to the new world. If you go to Michigan, there's a place called the Keweenaw Peninsula, which is where there's the mid-continent rift runs up through there. It's part of the tectonic plates, and there's a particular section of basalt stone that has jutted upward through the surface, through the crust, and pushed on top of it a vein of pure copper that is so pure it's never been found anything like it in the rest of the world. The copper that sits on top of this mid-continent ridge is 99.99% pure copper, which is pretty remarkable. And so it's called native Michigan float copper. It's also was that the receding glaciers also exposed it and everything. So anyway, we have archaeologists and mineralogists can go and look at this and tell you today, you can Google this, there are over 10,000 open copper pit mines. And they're usually not that big around, but they go down 20, 30 feet, and they've been mined out, right? And the mining stopped in 1100 BC. Just stopped. I mean, they know exactly when it ended because they can carbon date the tools that were left there in the copper, and the copper preserved the tools. And anyway, don't you find it interesting that the Bronze Age and the mining of copper in Michigan, the purest copper in the world? Oh, and by the way, mineralogists will tell you, geologists will tell you that 150 million metric tons of copper was removed from those 10,000 mines. Okay, let's do some math. 150 million tons. So where's all that copper? It's not. We don't find 100 million tons of copper artifacts here in North America. Not finding it. Not here. Not even 1% has been found here. So where did it all go? Well, it doesn't rot away. It doesn't dissolve, right? It doesn't oxidize. It doesn't rust.
I don't know. Tell us, Boyd.
Well, there's this funny thing that happened at the exact same time. It's called the Bronze Age.
Gee whiz.
Okay, and it ended at the same time. Something happened around 1235 BC. We don't know exactly what happened. Something to do with the ability for ships to get up into the Great Lakes, I believe, is what happened. And that was part of the rebound as the ice melted back. We know that the lakes were at least 60 feet deeper in antiquity, right? And that would have allowed sea travel and ships to come all the way up from the St. Lawrence Seaway all the way up into the Great Lakes and even down to sail down the Mississippi. I mean, it's just incredible the changes that have happened. So point is, this study, we've just submitted samples of this Michigan copper to Luleå, Sweden, which is the top copper laboratory in the world. And they are analyzing it, and they came back with 71 trace elements that are also found in that pure copper. And we are finding those exact signatures in the old world bronze artifacts.
Yeah, well, it makes sense to me. It makes sense to me that locals here would share the sailing trail, or at least, the like how they got to Wisconsin or Michigan or where this copper location is. And it would make sense to me that, the world would use that as a source of copper, because that is a lot of copper. Thank you so much. Any remaining remarks, dude, that you'd like?
I'll just say this. Now we're back to what I do for publishing. If people want to get any of the books that we publish, what's your keyword? Should we call it Zion Media? If you use Zion Media when you buy anything off my website, I will give you a 15% discount. So we can just put that out there. And if you want to put the link under this, we can do that too. But I want to reward all your viewers, and I really want, it's not about money. I really want to get all these books, content, material out to people. And I didn't really have time to go into it, but I do have a few of our really best sellers.
A few of those books here too as well.
Modernize America.
I thought the Book of Mormon was so
Yeah.
I got my daughters the mini hymn book and mini
And like
book magnet.
just look at how nice this is. Like, look at all this.
Yeah, it's huge kudos to Dave Hawking, how he organized and formatted these. He and I worked together on developing that style and that layout, and it just really kind of came together in an amazing way. Now we have 7 books in that series, and I recommend that over everything. Why? Because that's the scriptures, and at the end of the day, that's where all knowledge and wisdom comes from. And everything else is kind of commentaries on scriptures and prophets' words, but they all come from here. So that's our flagship. And like I said, Andrea saw us selling many, many cases. I had to go out so many times to retreat. We sold out of several of those copies at the show last week, but we still have more now. And just amazing with this Our Lord of Wholeness book, for example, just an incredible story behind how that has come about. 10 years of research he's put into that. Here's his phrase for Our Lord of Wholeness, which is the next book that's right there. That one. He said, we need to stop thinking of the atonement as a singular event that took place over a few days or a few hours. No, it is the counter force to entropy. It's like the drop in the universe that send ripples outward forever to undo the chaos that would otherwise ensue in the universe. It's that significant of an event. And he just really opened my mind to the enormity and the incredible power and beauty of the atonement. That's this book, Our Lord of Wholeness. And it's just amazing, some of the insights that he brings out in there. Anyway, I could do that with every book that I have. Everyone has an amazing story behind it. But I think we are out of time, so I'll wrap it there, David.
Thank you. I think we've had a really great episode. We went from Japan to Digital Legend, of course. We went to Mulek's, track and his story, the Oraqel Code as well. So, and we've proven with your desire that to basically give voice to the voices that have been silenced. We've been able to prove that's something that's true with the Oraqel Code for you, and so that's really phenomenal. There's so much more I would love to talk about too, and so when you do finish your book, I think it'd be great to have you come back on. We could discuss that and be able to go through a little bit more of the details of how that came about as well. We'd love to have you come back as well, Boyd. And just for the record too, on my wife's side, Boyd is actually a relative of mine too. So it's I'm happy to be able to say that as like the only Black person in Utah. Anyway, thank you very much.
I would like to say, I actually have always, like, to the people watching, I've always recommended this Book of Enoch whenever people want to know what to read, when they're asking like, oh, I want to read the Apocrypha. I always recommend this Book of Enoch because it's got all the different versions in it. It's got the Book of Moses in it. It's got all this stuff. So I thought it was interesting actually meeting the people behind it because I've just loved this for the past year.
Well, thanks, Chad.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Chad. So we'll go ahead and wrap up here. Thank you so much, Boyd, for coming on to Zion Media and sharing your story, and look forward to having you back on when your book is finished, which I think might be in the end of summer or end of the year.
Well, we never put specific dates, but we'll just say ASAP. This fall.
Hey, as soon as possible. Okay, well, no pressure. Well, as for myself, David the Lion Douglas, and Latter-day Chad, and also Andrea, and of course our wonderful guest Boyd Tuttle. Thank you for watching. Be sure to subscribe and like this video and hit the notification bell so that you can be notified of other videos in the future. And we will see you next time.